Okay, thank you everyone for coming. Thanks to the Frankensolar team for setting this up. I'll try to skip over a few things. I want to try to get some extra time at the end of the presentation. So feel free to interrupt me. I'm not a one-way kind of guy. So please ask questions when you want to ask questions. So Fronius Canada is in Mississauga, Ontario, just 15 minutes from here. Our bricks and mortar location has been here since 2007. It's 2007, right? Yeah, for welding. Yeah. Fronius started in 1945 in Austria, doing battery chargers for vehicles and now for forklifts and other electric applications. Not energy storage, so please don't ask. But then we got into welding, and now we're into solar energy, because welding and solar energy for inverters is functionally the same technology, but flipped. Feel free to ask more if you'd like. We have 3 business units. We have Perfect Charging, Solar Energy, and Perfect Welding. In Canada, we have Perfect Welding and Solar Energy, and both are very well-established business units in Canada. The good thing about that is we are also here in Canada. We have our bricks and mortar location in Mississauga. We have somewhere around 40 to 45 employees in Canada, and we are hiring to grow that team even larger. We're the only inverter manufacturer with a bricks and mortar location here, with tech support, local, Canadian, and with inventory in Canada, in addition to our great inventory that you can see downstairs with our distributors. Yeah, we've been around Canada since 2007 and doing solar in Canada since 2011. This is more propaganda that I won't get into too much detail on. One thing that I always love to talk about is our local tech support. We have 2 tech support staff in Canada committed to the Canadian market. That means committed to your projects and your installations. The great thing about this is they do not service American customers. So we don't have huge, gigantic whale customers that we're going to ignore you for. We're focused on Canada, we're focused on your projects and what you need, and we're happy to support you with all the technical support that you need. We're responsive on multiple platforms. I've seen Harsha replying via text while on the phone and writing an email all at the same time. So he can service 3 different customers all at once, and he does a pretty good job of doing that. We understand Canadian systems. We know Canada is a very unique climate compared to other parts of the world. We know that how things look in Southern Ontario are not the same as they look in Halifax, and it's definitely not the same as a windy February in Edmonton on a rooftop. We understand all the differences. And so we custom tailor our approach, how we answer questions, and how we support our customers, not only based on their projects, but also where their projects are located. One of the coolest things that we do that I think we're the only ones that do it is we book appointments. So I know a lot of guys in Canada, they'll have installations that are 6 hours away, or they're hard to reach locations, or they're on the top of a school or something like that. And so they need to have tech support exactly at the time that they're on the site. So what we'll do, you can put in a request with our tech support to say, I'll be on this site at this time and I really need someone to talk to. We will book an appointment, and on that day at that time, we will call your cell phone to give you support right at that time. Sorry. Started early. At Fronius, we believe in 24 hours of sun. That's the vision of Fronius. We believe that the world can be powered by renewable energy 24 hours a day. And while we're not doing wind or offshore stuff like that, we're doing our best to contribute to that vision as much as possible with the different products that we have. We are committed to quality. All of the components in our products are the top quality that we can source. And that is proof by some of the projects that we have installed in Canada. This is a project that was installed before Fronius Canada was even established to do solar. And they bought this project out of the US, or this product out of the US. It was installed right at the end of 2010 and has not had a single failure or issue since the original installation date. And you can see the last 2 years here on this report are the 2 best performing years for this product. So our products, it's power electronics, just like everything else. It will fail at some point, but we try to use as much high quality products as possible to make sure it lasts as long as it can. I'll go over our products really quickly. We have our Primos, which are single phase products. That's for residential and ground mounts commercial single phase services. So that's more common in like the prairies, Manitoba, Saskatchewan. They have a lot of farmers on single phase service. I think there's some farmers in Ontario on single phase service as well. So that's where our larger single phase products are more popular. On the residential side, 3.8 up to 10 kilowatts. And on the large single phase, that same 10 kilowatt up to 15 kilowatt as well for those different applications. On the 3-phase side, we've got 208 volt and 480 volt inverters. 208 volt are 10 and 12 kilowatt up to 600 volt DC input. That's with 2 MPPTs. And then we have our 15 kilowatt 208 volt Eco product, which is 1,000 volt DC input, but it is not, it does not have a bleed down circuit for rapid shutdown. So it's really mostly a ground mounted solution. The only time it can be used on a rooftop is when it's put within a meter of the array to avoid third-party rapid shutdown altogether. Otherwise, it's more designed for ground mount installations on 208 volt service. Then on the 480 volt side, with the transformer for the 600 volt plus installations, we have 15, 20, and 24 kilowatt power classes. These are more ideal for smaller commercial projects and some larger ones as well. We've done projects 1 megawatt, 2 megawatt, 2.5 megawatt. For a lot of reasons that I'll talk about in the upcoming slides, but basically because the failure rates are so low, and when there is a failure, it's more compartmentalized on larger projects, and because of our design philosophy, much easier to service and access than a larger commercial inverter or central inverter. We've got great mounting options. You can see in the inverter that we have downstairs. The mounting bracket's got a lot of great connection points, 4x5 grid, so there's lots of great ways. You only need 3 or 4 screws to get that mounted. And it can be installed 0 to 90 degrees, so it can be put on a flush mounted roof. It can be put on a flat mounted roof as well, or it can be put on the side of the house or in the garage or in the electrical room. A lot of variability for where you can install our products, and there's no issue with warranty installing in any of those applications. Now, when we look at outdoor, like on a rooftop installation, for example, if it's sitting on the roof right next to the array, power electronics are like anything else that turns on and turns off. It doesn't like the sun. And that's not just a Fronius thing, that's any inverter. So whenever you put them right in the direct sunlight, we always recommend our shade cover product. That'll give it some protection from the elements and let it live a longer, happier, healthier life. The example I always love to give is if you've got a garage and you've got a car, do you prefer to park it in the garage or in the driveway? Everyone always says garage because it'll just survive a little bit better in there. We also have a dynamic peak manager for those of you who are familiar with max power point trackers. So historically on string inverters, on any inverters, there's max power point tracker, which basically traces the IV curve to find the highest efficiency production point. When there's an intermittent shade, it'll change the shape of the IV curve. And on traditional technologies in the past, there's not a resweep of the curve, so it'll be stuck in that, I forget what it's called, the hipped curve. What is it called? Anyway, it's not a big deal. So all of our inverters that you can buy now have Dynamic Peak Manager inbuilt into the inverter, but it's not enabled. So all you have to do is go into the inverter menu and enable it. Please do that on every single one of your inverters. What it's basically doing is after there's an intermittent shade that passes, it won't get stuck in the local max power point curve. It'll resweep the entire IV curve every 5 minutes to find the global max power point and get you the most production out of your array, out of your system. Yes? Why doesn't Fronius automatically enable that dynamic peak manager? So like I said, it's in all of our inverters already. The reason that it was disabled was because AFCI is unique to North America for now. And so when the algorithm was built for Dynamic Peak Manager, AFCI didn't yet exist because all of the market was in Europe at the time. And so when we brought it to North America, there was the AFCI that was introduced, arc fault circuit interruption. And what would happen was there would be a fast-moving cloud or an airplane or something that would cause shading to go across the array, and it would cause a drop in voltage. And the Dynamic Peak Manager would see that as an arc fault, and it would knock the inverter off and say there was an arc fault somewhere on the array. So they'd set a default to be disabled so that they would avoid those arc fault issues. Over time, we've improved that algorithm, and now the algorithm no longer sees that as an arc fault, and it works perfectly fine. But going back to a product that was developed that long ago and changing that software, it's easier to just go into the inverter menu. It's a couple of buttons in there to make the change. But I encourage you, for any previously installed inverter, Fronius inverters that you have, or any new installations that you're doing, during the commissioning process, it's just one of the options in the inverter menu to enable the Dynamic Peak Manager. Please do that. It'll give you your system better performance. Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Our inverters are designed for Canada, -40 out of the box on the cold temperature side. So any remote installations you're doing, any further north installations that you're doing, we have the best solution out of the box out of any inverter manufacturer for that reason. That's why we have the #1 market share in the territories in Canada, and we have a number of inverters installed in the Arctic Circle in Canada, because -40 operating temperature means it'll work at the coldest, on the coldest days for our climate. On the high temperature side, we derate at the highest temperatures because we have forced cooling in our inverters. So there's a cooling fan exterior to blow over the radiation fins, and then the interior fans to circulate the air inside the inverter. So at the highest temperatures, we get the best production as well. I've been talking to a lot of you about the serviceability. So serviceability is one of our key benefits to working with Fronius. On the left-hand side, you can see there's the picture of the mounting bracket that I showed earlier, all the different mounting flanges. And you can see inside the mounting bracket is where all the wiring is done. The reason for this is, in this picture on the right, you can see this is the actual inverter itself, the power stage that's pivoting off of the mounting bracket. So our failure rates are very low. Alex was saying probably around half of a percent. When there is a failure with a Fronius inverter, it's very simple to do the service. All you need to do is throw the DC disconnect in the off position. 6 screws come out of the inverter. You take off the power stage, put the new one back on, 6 screws back in, DC disconnect, and your system's back online right away. The extra benefit is, because all the wiring is done in the terminal block inside the mounting bracket, if you don't have an electrician on staff or one that's not available, you don't need to send an electrician to site to do the service, because they're not touching any of the wiring when they're doing that service. So it's a major advantage for cost of ownership, reducing the cost of ownership when you have a Fronius inverter. We also have the FSP program in Canada. That stands for Fronius Service Provider. So FSPs basically come into our facility, or we go to them and provide 3 days of training where we disassemble the inverters down to the guts. All of our inverters are mechanically fastened, all the boards, so they can be removed in the field. And then when they reassemble the inverters, they go through all the different failure modes. So looking at where the failure happens, on which board, which component, what that could be caused by, and how they can identify what the issue is on site. So what that arms the FSPs to do is to go to site, see what failed inside the inverter, and say, okay, this on the DC board failed. I know this is usually caused by poor connections in the strings, so they can go and check all the strings, make sure all the connections are tight. Once they've fixed the issue, they can go back, swap out the inverter while they're in the field, because they buy spare parts kits from us. So they can swap the failed board in the field and get it all serviced and back online with a single truck roll. That's been a very successful program for us in Canada. We've got FSPs now in 3 provinces. We're looking to, by this time next year, have FSPs in 6 provinces and 1 territory, or 2 territories, sorry. So we're expanding this program across the country to support our customers and to support you if you need the support. We also have our rapid shutdown boxes. We've got the Quattro down on the desk there as well if you want to take a closer look at it. But our rapid shutdown boxes basically sell themselves because they replace a combiner box if one is needed on the site. And usually it's at a lower cost than the combiner box. The Quattro is up to 4 strings in, 2 strings out. So you could do 2 strings output back to the inverter on each MPPT to get you individual MPPT performance on a 3 or 4 string array on the roof. Yes?
Yeah, for the stringing, the length, the stringing length are the same, right? Or doesn't matter?
If it's on a single MPPT, yes, they should be the same orientation and the same string length.
Okay.
But if it's on 2 separate MPPTs, then you could do different string lengths.
Like for one input, you can do 2 different strings, right? On one input?
On a residential small Primo, yes,
Okay.
2. On a large Primo or a Simo, you could do 3.
Okay. Thank you.
We also have the data manager. So for all Primos that you buy in Canada, are you guys all out of the light Primo stock? Still some? Okay, so for most Primos that you buy in Canada, they'll come with the data manager included. And any Simos that you buy do not have the data manager. You only need one for up to 99 inverters in most cases. There are some exceptions for limited export and zero export and things like that. But in general, you only need one data manager. The data manager can be anywhere in the array. So if you've got a system with 15 inverters, it doesn't have to be on inverter 1 or inverter 15. It can be on any of the inverters in the daisy chain. This is the brains of the operation. It basically processes all the data. It allows you to connect to the internet. You can connect via LAN, Modbus. It's got a Wi-Fi antenna as well. You can connect via Wi-Fi. And the great thing about this, because we have multiple connection points, you can connect to our monitoring platform, which is SolarWeb, and also connect to a third-party platform. So the one I'm most familiar with is Cashland historically, but if there's a third party, if you've got a larger portfolio, there's a third-party platform that you want to use, you can still use SolarWeb and also use the third-party monitoring platform. I won't get into this too much. I wanted to do a live demo of SolarWeb at the end of the presentation, so I hope there's time for that. But we have 3 monitoring platforms. We have the SolarWeb online, which we'll look at. We've got the SolarWeb app, which you can use on a smart device. And we've got a Solar TV lobby display, which is terrible, so I won't talk about it. Inverter registration is something that's a very important topic for us. For a number of reasons. The first primary reason for us is because it allows us to help you better. So if you've got your inverter registered on SolarWeb with your SolarWeb account, then we have all of the data or most of the data that we need to better support you if there is a technical support issue in the future. Because then we can identify who you are, where you installed the inverter, and all of the inverter information right away, and it saves a whole bunch of process in talking to you in the future when that inverter potentially has a failure. The second benefit is our warranty start date. Our warranty start is the date that the inverter is sold. So if I sell an inverter to Frankensolar and it sits on their shelf, it can't really happen these days, but if it sits on their shelf for 6 months or 8 months, and then they sell it to you, and then you have it for another 3 months before you're able to install it, that's a full year gone from the day that we sold it to Frankensolar. Now, if you go on and register your inverter, the warranty start date will change from the date of sale to the date of registration. So you regain a full year of warranty potentially for your system by registering the inverter. So if you're buying a Fronius inverter, please make sure that you register it on SolarWeb so you get the full 10 years warranty for that inverter. I won't go too much into the weather, but we have a weather station option available as well for remote installations. If you want to get local weather data, you can. We've got the wind speed sensor, ambient temperature, module temperature, and irradiance. You can buy any of the combination or all 4 if you're interested in getting local weather performance data. Smart meter is a very important product for us these days, and I'll show why in the SolarWeb demonstration, but it allows for consumption monitoring directly on our monitoring platform. Now, people say to me all the time, why would I want that? I could just call Hydro One or whoever my local hydro company is and get my consumption data there. True, but this will provide you real-time data right on top of your production data from your PV array. And I'll show you why that's cool in the SolarWeb demonstration. We can also do consumption based feed-in limitations. So if there's situations where there's limited export or zero export back onto the grid, we can work with your team to support setting up feed-in limitations with that. What it's doing basically is feeding the consumption data back to the data manager, and the data manager then will look at the generation data and the consumption data and make sure generation never exceeds consumption, so you're not backfeeding to the grid. Trainings are a very important topic for us as well. We have bi-weekly webinars, 2 webinars every month, not bi-weekly. 2 webinars every month where we'll talk about a whole bunch of different topics. Inverter commissioning, setting up communication. We also do inverter installation best practices. So because we have our tech support in Canada looking at Canadian installations, we see a lot of what people do a very good job of, and we love that, and we like to share that experience. But we also see a lot of the common mistakes that installers make, and so we'll tie that into that training as well. So in that training we'll talk about, make sure you're making this connection, avoid doing this common mistake that people make, just so that we want to enable you as much as possible to get as much success out of your experience with Fronius as we can. On top of that, we have custom trainings on a very regular basis. So if you want to train your staff or you want to train your team or your customer, we're more than happy to set up custom trainings on that as well. What we're also working on, which is going to be launching very soon, as Ted has assured me, we're working on a YouTube video series where we walk through the entire installation process through very short 2 to 2.5 minute videos. So there'll be a video on setting up communication, a video on setting up your data manager, exactly, a video on commissioning the inverter. And they're all 2.5 minutes long, so if you're doing an installation and you're stuck on one step, you can go to the site, go to the step that you're stuck on, watch a 2-minute video, and it should tell you exactly what to do if you're having issues with that process. And if you're still having issues, of course, you can always call tech support and we'll help you walk through that process as well. We have a newsletter which I encourage everyone to sign up for, where we're announcing all of our trainings, any new product information, that type of stuff is all going to be on there. We do not spam ever. It's one newsletter every month, so you'll never get more than 12 emails from us every year. For anyone looking at retrofits, this is especially relevant in Ontario. Anyone that's got microfits or fits that they're working on where they want to swap out some old stuff. I get people reaching out to us all the time with old AEs or Keikos or whatever the technology is that want to swap out with Fronius. We just say, please, please, please talk to us first, or talk to Alex. Alex will give you all the information as well. But the technology from installations 10 years ago and the technology now is very different. We no longer ground the array, for example. The module technologies are different. So in a lot of cases, you can't just swap an old inverter with a new one. You need to do you have to have some extra consideration beyond that. So please reach out to Frankensolar, please reach out to us, and we will make sure that your system will not explode as soon as you install it and turn it on. We have a tool called the Solar Online Support Tool. This is awesome, people love it. Basically now, if you have a state code on your inverter, the process is you call tech support, you say, hey, Harsha, I've got this inverter, I've got this error code on it, what do I do? So Harsha's got a cheat sheet where it'll say, here's the inverter class, here's the state code, and then it'll walk him through a step-by-step process. So he'll go through that process with you. The SOS tool is basically a mini Harsha. So you put in the inverter that you've got, you put in the state code that you've got, and it'll walk you through that same step-by-step process. If it fixes the problem, fantastic. You don't even need to interact with tech support in Canada. If it doesn't fix the problem, the really cool thing is it automatically opens a case for you in our system, and it lets us know of the steps that you went through. So when you do get a hold of us, you don't have to tell us which inverter you're working with, what the site is, or what the error code is. We already know that you've gone through those steps. will bypass that entire process and get right to the meat and potatoes to get your system back online or to get you an RMA to replace that product. The good thing is, if we're humans, we have regular working hours. If you need to do work on a site on the weekend or in the evening or something, you can go through that troubleshooting process on your own time without having to wait for us to be back in the office the next day. I talk, I don't want to say, anyway, there's a lot of myths in the industry about solar. I was going to say I talk a lot of shit. There's a lot of myths in the industry about solar and about how solar works and all this type of stuff. So I just want to address some things, some common things that are discussed in the industry and shed some more light on what the truth is behind them. I think Alex might talk about a few of these tomorrow as well. People say designing with string inverters is really hard and they don't want to think about it. They just want to get up and start slapping modules on the roof. When I do the SolarWeb demo, I'll show you this, but if you're taking more than 60 seconds to do a system design with a Fronius inverter, you really shouldn't. It's very, very straightforward, very easy. I'll walk through the process. You'll see it's very simple. Optimizers and microinverters produce more power. Alex, is this true? No. He said no, just so everyone's aware. He said no. Yeah. No, they do not. Actually, in most cases, you will always get more kilowatt hours annually of PV generation out of a string inverter than you will out of a microinverter or an optimized inverter. There's a lot of data. This is coming from the horse's mouth, so maybe you don't believe me. There's a lot of data available online. I encourage you to do your own research and check. But you will see a lot of paper and documents from professional organizations explaining that you will get, in almost every case, more energy out of a string inverter than out of an optimized inverter or a microinverter.
I think there's a good study that was done in Europe. What is it called?
It's a Dutch university that did that.
Yeah. I've got a slide from that study coming up. Module level devices are safer. Is this true? Well, they're not safer. They're not less safe. The problem is, when you look at PV systems around the world, 50% of failures are caused by power electronics and poor connections. Between those two, fire and failure, 50% of them caused by power electronics and connection points. When you have module level power electronics like an optimizer or a string inverter, you increase the number of power electronics by the number of modules that you have on the roof. So if you've got 22 modules on the roof, you've got one string inverter, that's one power electronics, 1 point of failure. But then you have 22 power electronics, or maybe 11 if it's a 2-to-1, on the roof for the 2-to-1s or 22 for an array. That increases that number by 22 times, as an example. And connection points also increases it by 22 times. So you're increasing the 50% of the cause of fires and failures by 11 to 22 times on your customer's rooftop. Do you have a question, Danny?
No.
Oh, just a big stretch. A lot of times we hear this myth. Owners need to know if their modules have failed. Or owners want to see their modules to see how they're performing. They want to make sure that they're working and that they haven't failed. Who in here has been doing this for more than 2 years? Show of hands. Okay, anyone please shout out a number. How many module failures have you experienced? 2 in the back. And you've done, how many modules do you think you've installed? A lot.
Thousands.
Thousands. And there's been 2 failures. But the devices that are going under to monitor the modules for failures are power electronics. And they absolutely will fail multiple times before you'll ever see a failure on a module, which means you're putting a device for that customer which is monitoring itself for failure. Another very common myth that I hear is that if you get a leaf on one of your modules, that's it, that entire string is gone. That's why string inverters are useless. Or if you've got a bird nesting up there and they drop a huge load on your module, that whole string is done. So, show of hands, everyone that knows what's a bypass diode for? Anyone? Go ahead. I know Alex knows, he knows everything.
Okay. It allows you to bypass a group of cells that may be covered.
Exactly. So, I'll go with, Longi is in here, I think. Is Longi in here? No, but they're popular, so I'll bring it up. I'll tell Mike after. Longi, a lot of people are buying the split cell. So how many bypass diodes are in a split cell module?
6. Three still?
3 typically.
Yeah, it's 3.
Really?
Yeah, because it's a
thought
half
it was-
side on top, half of the bottom, and each group from top and bottom should be the
Okay,
same.
all right. Okay, so 3. Okay, all right. I thought it was 6. My bad. So anyway, there's 3. So if there's a leaf on 1 or 4 of the cells of the PV module, as long as there's power going to that module, then that bypass diode will activate and shunt that string of cells out of that module. So functionally, all of the heavy lifting is being done by the module itself, and whatever you have attached to that module is irrelevant. Nothing is being done, whether it's an optimizer or a microinverter or a string inverter. It doesn't matter because that bypass diode is doing all of the heavy lifting, and there is no impact on the adjacent cells and adjacent modules in that string. It doesn't even affect the other strings of cells in that module. So, myth busted. So, assuming, go ahead.
How long has that technology been around too?
Always.
Always?
Always. So no matter how long they've been telling you that the leaf is going to kill your system, it's always been incorrect.
That's propaganda by the competition.
It's coming from Danny, not me. I didn't say that. So, like I said, this information is coming from the horse's mouth, although I've gotten validation from Danny and Alex. But assuming I'm just talking shit up here like I love to do, and I've been lying this whole time, this is one more thing to consider. We've talked about inverters, microinverters, optimizers. They're all power electronics. They will fail. So let's say, just for argument's sake, my product quality is exactly the same as my competitor's product quality, the same failure rates. So we'll put it at 1%, okay? Over a 20-year life of the system, there are many things that can happen which can cause the inverter to fail, or microinverter or optimizer. So if you've got the optimizers or microinverters up on the roof and they fail, unfortunately, they don't like to fail all at the same time. They all have their own minds. So say, for example, this one fails. Anyone who's doing O&M, can you tell me approximately, not including transportation, not including getting to the site and back, because that's a standard, what is the cost to do this service for a customer? Anyone? Just a 250? Who said that? Actually 250? You need 2 guys. You need to get up on, I mean, by the book, like following the law, you need 2 guys, you need a ladder, you need fall arrest. This is easily, I usually get somewhere around $600 to $700 for this service call. Okay? That's one service call, fine. Even if it's 250 bucks, fine, no problem. The issue is, you fix it and then this happens. Well, how much does this cost? Want to give me a number?
You gonna make fun of it again?
No, I won't make fun of it, I promise you.
Make fun of it.
Anyway,
It's even easier to change.
it's a little bit easier, yeah, because they're on the edges, you're right. But it's 2 different roof surfaces, so let's say this is the same price as the last one. Okay? Then this happens. A little bit harder to contact, but still relatively, I'll say probably 800, 900 bucks for this service call. Problem is, what do you do when this happens? Most people tell me from the crowd, this is an entire work day for 2 guys on site. This is easily $1,500, $2,000 service call for that customer. That service call is not being completely covered by the warranty from my competitors. I've confirmed this. And that cost is going to that customer, and they're going to be losing their minds if you got to get out there and spend a whole day with 2 guys. The problem is you don't get any referrals from this customer anymore because now they're pissed that they got to keep paying you to do the service. And all the time that you're spending on site doing the replacements, what are you not doing? Selling and installing new PV systems, where you're actually making your money. So if you look at the cost of ownership for these things, the MLPE stuff is a little bit more expensive up front, but looking over the 20-year life of the system, substantially more expensive. Because with a Fronius inverter, you only need one guy going to site, and he doesn't even have to be an electrician if you don't have one available, because to do an RMA on a Fronius system, all the wiring's in the mounting bracket, which they don't need to touch. You pop 6 screws, DC disconnect off, take the power stage off, put the new one back on, 6 screws, DC disconnect back on, system's back online right away. You don't have to get on a ladder, you don't have to get on a roof, and typically I'll get estimates of 150 bucks, maybe, to do a Fronius service call. Usually guys will tell me if it's taking you more than 45 minutes to swap a Fronius inverter, you're doing something wrong. Save yourself the headache, save your customer the headache. Don't worry so much about O&M, keep it as simple as possible, and install instead of doing service. I'll jump through the rest. There's a lot of information online about, there's a website called Why Fix MLSD that gives more information about module level shutdown and the issues with it and what the long-term solution will be. So I encourage you to visit that website. It's a really good one. There's also that study that Alex was mentioning before. I changed the look of the inverter because I don't want to advertise for my customer. It's an SMA inverter of it. But anyway, to say, but just to say, the study talks about the performance compared with a string inverter versus MLPE, and it shows that the string inverter does outperform the MLPE solution. I'll jump to the SolarWeb live demo right now, and we'll do a quick string design if that's okay with everyone. Am I doing okay on time?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Lots
okay.
of time.
Oh, perfect. So we'll do a quick string design here. So this is our string design tool. If you go to creator.fronius.com/pv-design, that'll take you to our tool. And that'll help you to design with one of our inverters. So first thing to do when you get to this tool is change it to Canada because we are not Austrians, most of us. And then from there, someone shout out a module manufacturer. So I did not expect to hear that. Okay, Longy. Now, wattage?
405, LR5.
405?
Yeah, LR5.
LR5.
Yeah, no.
HBH?
Well, HBB. The black one. HBB. No, it's the black one.
Is it here?
I think it was right below it. 54. Yeah, down. Just one.
Oh, there we go. Beautiful. If you already have a string design in mind, you can put in the number of modules. Otherwise, you can leave it blank to see what configurations are possible. Module temperature, I usually do -25. If you're in colder places, you could do -30, -35. Keep in mind, this is module temperature, not ambient temperature, and it typically doesn't get colder than that, no matter where you are. And on the high side, I leave it at 70 degrees Celsius because those things get hot in the summer. If you've got a bifacial module, you could do the bifacial gain based on the spec sheet of the module in there. We'll leave that blank for now. And then you select the inverter. We're doing single phase or 3-phase? Alex?
Single.
Okay, let's go with a Primo. And we will go with, we're doing residential?
Yeah. 7.6.
7.6. I knew you were going to say 7.6.
Just a nice
7.6, 240, 600 volt. That's our guy. And then we got to set the inverter ratio, so that's the oversizing. So we don't want to undersize.
Can you, sorry, could you probably mention why you had to pick the 600 and not the
If you don't pick the 600, it'll give you design up to 1,000 volt, but 1,000 volt is not possible on that inverter. So
Ontario?
in Ontario, yeah. So just go with on that inverter in general. So just go with, make sure you click 600, so it doesn't give you, yeah.
We talked about this before.
Yeah, okay, all right, you can go 1,000. Okay, so you don't want to undersize, so you go 100% on the low side, and for this inverter, you can go up to
150, right?
150, that's right. Although it won't let me change that field for some reason. That's strange.
What?
All right.
It's going down. Well, that's it.
All right. Let's load this again. So with experience, you could do this pretty easily and quickly. And we have lots of time, I was told, so. Five here. This guy, right?
Is this tool free on the Fronius website?
Sorry?
Is this tool on the Fronius website for people who don't have great eyes?
Yeah, so it's creator.fronius.com/pv-design. Or if you just go,
Creator.fronius.com works.
it'll take them to the creator, and then there's a button on the top right-hand side. I'll show what it looks like as well.
Yeah, it's $50 per use.
Free, yes, free. Is that what the question was? Is it free? Oh, my hearing is terrible, so just, yes, it's completely free. And I'll say as well, when you sign up for SolarWeb, please buy the premium version. You got to put in a $0 transaction. I encourage you to do it. You don't have to put a credit card or anything, but it'll give you access to the entire historical data of the generation on that inverter. So please, sorry? Oops. Yes. Okay, so now you get this chart at the bottom showing the different configuration options. So the bold number on the top is showing you the number of modules you can connect to this inverter, and then you can see the kilowatt peak production on the DC side, and then under that you see the oversizing ratio. So I like even numbers because I like even size strings, but we don't have to do that right now. What do we want to do, 123 oversize? What do you think?
Sure.
Good number? So we pick 123, that's 23 modules on that inverter, and then you can see the different configurations there. So you could do a string of 13 and a string of 10, or a string of 12 and a string of 11. Those are the two different options you can pick. From there, you can click on one of those options. So I'll pick that one, and then it'll give you a report. It'll show all the different performance for each MPPT based on the specs that we have in our database for that module and for that inverter. Then you can click on Create Report. It'll generate a PDF report that you can automatically add to that system's project files. Very quick, very easy, typically no less than a minute to do this, unless you can't put the oversizing ratio above 120. Then you have to reset it. Okay, when you log on to it from the original page, oh no, that's to the direct link. So if you go to creator.fronius.com, just continue as guest. You can log in with your SolarWeb if you want to save profiles. And then to access that tool, just a button in the top right-hand corner that says Quick PV Design. If you click on that, it'll take you to the tool for the quick PV design. Yep.
You put in 150%, but could you put in a higher value?
So the official oversizing limitation is 150% on most of our inverters, except the Eco, which is 135 for the 15 kilowatt 208. If you want to exceed 150, it is possible. We've accepted applications, I think, up to 186%, but we need to do a special application. So you would reach out to us, send us the configuration for the system, and we'll let you know if you can exceed the 150 or not. If you want to do like 180% all perfect orientation, 10 degrees south facing, probably not, but it's always worth reaching out to us and checking if it's possible for guys that want to exceed 150. So now we'll look at SolarWeb. I've got, this is my screen. I've got some special access. I work there, so I got a hookup. One of the sites, this is just a standard site just with an inverter and a data manager. This is what you'll see on SolarWeb. It's great. You get all the performance, the system information. So here you can see Right now it's at 50% utilization because it's a 100 kilowatt system. And then over here you can see the energy balance today. So we can click on that to look at a more detailed image. You can see, obviously, look outside. This is in southern Ontario, so it's been a pretty cloudy day. And there's not going to be great performance for today. We can look at historical information as well for the month. We can also look at the year, so month by month. So obviously April is going to be the best. We can also go back to last year or any year since the system was online in SolarWeb. So let's go back to June of last year. We'll click on that to show the daily production. Let's see, it looks like June 4th was the nicest day. Oh no, here we go. June 18th. So now we'll click on that. Beautiful. Beautiful PV production curve. It's oversized, so you can see it's plateauing at about, let's see, probably around 9:45.
But there's clipping.
Oh, it's actually, sorry, yeah, it's clipping at 10:30. There is no problem with clipping, Danny. Thank you.
If anyone wants to
You want to ask
find
more
out
questions?
more,
Yeah.
talk to Alex. There's also a presentation on clipping on our YouTube channel
Yeah.
that Alex did down in Halifax. So
Just to say, if you have more generation than you can produce out of the inverter, nothing is going to burn down, I assure you. We'll go back to another site that has a smart meter. So that's what you can see just with the inverter and the data manager. It's fantastic. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Go back to Caledonia Solar, and we'll go back. So now you can see, like I said, there's the inverter with the utilization and the energy balance today, just showing the generation of the inverter. There's also some, you can put a picture and look at the local weather data and all this type of stuff. In earnings and things, you can set those parameters in SolarWeb, so you can customize, you know, if you've got a net metering contract, what your net metering rate is, to see how much money you're saving. It'll show you how many trees you've saved and how many cars you've taken off the road and all that type of stuff. If you have a smart meter, things change a little bit because now you have an energy flow diagram. You no longer just see the inverter and how much power you're producing. You also have the data of how much power you are consuming. So for your customers, they can now see how their energy is flowing in their home. So here you can see now, this is the display that we had before. 4 kilowatts right now on this site. It's 10%. This is a 45 kilowatt system using 3 Primo 15s. Right now, it's 100% self-sufficient because he is consuming less power than he is producing off of his array and backfeeding the rest to the utility. 1.29 kilowatts being fed back to the utility. So you have a much better understanding of your energy usage on your property. Now, if you look at the energy balance today, it's now a net chart showing your generation and your consumption together. If we click on that, we can see a lot more detailed information here to show the blue line here is the consumption, what your current consumption is. The gray area is the power to grid, you can see off of the PV generation. And the yellow area is the amount of consumption fully serviced by the PV array, from the generation from the PV array. So again, we can look back to historical information to see, let's go back to last year so we can get a nice beautiful day. Love that chef's kiss, so I want to do it again. Let's go to June, usually it's a pretty good month. That's nice looking. Okay, so not perfect, but you can see now, get a much better understanding of what the energy profile is for that customer. So we can see here, this guy's got some pumps on site and some heat pumps, which are coming online pretty regularly, cycling regularly. He's added more. So now if we go back to today, where am I looking here? If we go back to 2000 and, it's in March, we can see his consumption is much higher because he's added some additional components. So he's got heat pumps now on the site, so that's where they're cycling here at this point. I believe he's also got an electric vehicle that's coming online at some point. So he can get a much better understanding of his energy usage directly compared with his PV generation on SolarWeb. Any questions on that? That's all I have, so any questions in general? Yes?
How does this, I think
The SMA?
AC coupling.
I don't see any reason why there would be an issue. They're completely independent. I think Alex is better to answer that question. He's got the experience, but just from a high-level technology perspective, I don't see that there would be any compatibility issues. AC coupling is pretty independent of the performance of the DC system, and so I don't know that there would be any overlap concerns.
For backup's not a problem. You could use any inverter.
Yeah.
Tesla, Powerwall, SMA
Yeah.
system, whatever. The main difference is for off-grid, if you have continuous operation with a grid tie inverter, because the grid tie inverter must have a P off F function, so
Yep.
a curtailment for a higher frequency in the grid, if you have this frequency shift, that you have a linear production curve. And that's typically only implemented in newer grid codes, especially in the 1741 SB that is coming to
Yep.
market right now. So more sophisticated inverter with the newest grid code are easier to integrate, or you have a software like the SMA software that has a specific grid code for off-grid applications.
Yeah.
That is very specific and adjusted to those applications.
That said, we've been seeing a lot of push towards microgrid setups as well lately, which will form their own grid, and there won't be any compatibility issues that way. So in microgrid setups, it'll typically be up to the microgrid controller manufacturer. So there's Victron, Schneider, a whole bunch now that are certified in Canada. So there can be completely off-grid installations with Fronius as well. We've done a number of microgrids in Canada, and we're happy to support for any microgrid controller manufacturer to make sure that we are in line with all of their configurations for that system. Okay.
You were showing us the design. You selected your case. It was like DC to AC ratio of 1.23, and you mentioned that your typical limit was 1.5.
Mm-hmm.
And if we had if we wanted to go higher, we would contact you, and the theoretical limit was like 1.86 or something.
I'm just saying that's the biggest that we've approved so far.
Okay, and then but you threw out a couple parameters. Like it was south facing and
So
what would the parameters be that we would?
So typically the larger systems that we've approved have been east-west systems, because you're not getting the full production of 1.86 for the entire day. So you'll get less production on the east-facing side in the morning than the west-facing side in the afternoon. Those are not hard parameters. I'm just saying that's an example of what I've seen so far, but that's up to the international technical team to look at the different site considerations, to look at historical weather data and things like that, and from that they'll determine if we can exceed to the amount of oversizing that you want beyond 150.
Have you had any field inputs, like from people who have installed at the limit, at that limit, and what's been the
No issues so far.
pushback or like info, has worked a higher rate of failure or anything?
No, we've had no issues so far.
Okay.
So they'll do all the analysis. Basically, how power electronics works is there's a certain uptime, operation time, for each of the different components in power electronics. And so when you're oversizing them, technically what you're doing is accelerating that uptime, that performance time. And so they're just wanting to make sure that you're not overtaxing the components in the inverter. And so they're just doing they're running a couple of quick numbers based on the site data to make sure that we're not reducing the life of the system. There's not going to be failures per se, but it might just decrease the life of the system. So if it would have lasted, say for example, 16 years for you, it might cut that by 1 year or 2 years because you're overtaxing the components. So we want to make sure that we're not doing that and that the system will still work for the entire life that we plan for it.
There's one more option for Fronius. You could, for example, buy a 12 kilowatt inverter, derate it or have it derated to 10 kilowatts, because the 1.5 applies to the nameplate rating of the unit.
Right.
And that gives you additional room without hitting the limits by Fronius warranty.
Right.
And you still get your AC or DC to AC ratio at much higher, even.
So you could do 1.5 at 12 kilowatts and have a 10 kilowatt AC output.
Exactly.
1.5 at 12 kilowatts and derated to 10.
That's right.
Oh, I see.
And I believe you guys are printing new nameplates, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, so Frankensolar does provide that service. if you want to do that, that's a good option as well, to get that oversight, that above 150 oversizing.
But then you would just be clipping more, right? So that's a big disadvantage to doing that.
It will not clip more because you're comparing it to a 10 kilowatt Fronius versus a D-rated 12 to a 10. So 10 kilowatts in either way, AC. You're just buying a 12 kilowatt unit for a warranty.
Yeah.
That's the only difference.
But either way, you're going to be, if you've got 1.76 oversize on a 10 kilowatt inverter or a D-rated 12 kilowatt, the clipping is going to be the same. So that's up to whoever's designing the system. They should already know how much they're clipping.
And it's also just to appease the warranty, basically, is the approval.
Yeah, well, and like I was saying, we could look at the application, but that's a more streamlined way to do it, where you don't have to put in the application, wait for the response.
Are you seeing more and more designers going higher?
In Ontario.
Overbuilt?
Well, I think everywhere. Alex could probably, you want to speak to it? Or?
Ontario is very prevalent, especially in the residential scale.
Yeah.
Because we have the CIA limit or easy access to 10 kilowatts.
Yeah.
And if you have a system that is 15, 16, 17 for the customer, it doesn't justify all the engineering expense, the application fee to get a 12 or 13 kilowatt inverter into that system. We see the same thing in Yukon NWT, where we have microgrids, where they want to have that nice production curve, because they want to have that reliable production, even if the weather is not perfect. So they also run with, for example, very high tilt east-west systems, and then a DC to AC ratio also in the range of 2 to 1, to really guarantee that nice performance of the system. And yes, they're throwing away kilowatt hours, but in that grid application, the reliability of the system and that constant feed-in is worth more than a few kilowatt hours you're actively curtailing by the oversizing.
It's better than diesel.
Exactly, because the opposite would be the diesel.
And also, I think like clipping has always been like a really like a topic that people have talked about, and if you really do your research, you'll see pretty quickly that the amount of clipping, even at 50 or 60%, is quite minimal overall, and that has to do with the way that, amongst other things, solar panels are tested, right? Standard test conditions, which are not something that you would see, for example, on a summer day, right? Where it's really hot outside and you'll have a lot of losses from heat. So your 405 watt panel in the summer, probably not going to put out 405 watt because it's just really hot outside, right? So you'll probably be looking into it producing 360 watt. So you do want to do, or even less, because Bilal was just talking about 70 degrees Celsius temperature, right, for the solar panel. So you have a lot of losses from heat. So you kind of got to design with that in mind as well.
Anyone stuck their hand under a module in the middle of summer? If you haven't, don't.
Don't. Is that why birds nest in the winter? I think it's because it's nice and warm underneath the panel.
Yeah,
Amongst other things.
amongst other things, yeah.
Shade, wind.
Shelter in general, yeah. Yep.
So is any of the Fronius inverters compatible with DC energy storage system?
With which, sorry?
Is it compatible with like DC batteries?
With any manufacturer batteries.
Battery is compatible.
Yeah, AC coupled for now. Yeah, no hybrid systems, no hybrid inverters yet.
There will be a DC coupled product coming out in 2038, I think.
Come on, 2032. Don't listen to him. 2032.
There's been something in the pipeline for a very long time, and
Yeah,
we're
we're working on it.
year, right? So
So you're saying there's a chance? Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, next year is the unofficial official day, but it's hard to say. The U.S. code situation has been very challenging for developing new products. There's no other inverter manufacturer in here that can empathize with me, but I'm sure Art would agree if he was here.
so what was that?
Hey, what's the largest inverter you guys have on the market right now?
24 kilowatt.
And how come so low? Like, do you guys have any plans to?
There is a bigger product in Europe and the rest of the world that's not coming to North America.
Why don't you like us?
I will say it's a combination of things. The code situation in the U.S. hamstrung us on that a little bit. And a little bit of dropping the ball, just don't tell anyone I said
Well,
that.
We look at lots of other manufacturers have, 50 and 100 kilowatt,
Yeah.
150 kilowatt products.
Yeah. And they're also getting very mad on a very regular basis for selling products in the US. No, I totally acknowledge that. I would love to have a bigger product. 24 is the biggest we've got.
But on the positive side, Fronius does have the largest string inverter out there. Sorry, largest single-phase string inverter out there.
Yeah.
With the 15 kilowatt primal, which is quite unique and good.
Yeah, on single phase and three phase 208, we're usually the most competitive. On the three phase commercial systems for 600 volt connection, it's a little bit harder. We have, like I said, we've got some projects in the megawatt range. I've got two projects in Canada over 2 megawatts with Simo 24. It really depends on what the end customer's application case is, right? So if they want pure generation with maximum uptime, then having the distributed architecture with the smaller Simo 24s works for them. And because it's so quick and easy to service, that downtime for any failed inverter is usually less than 1 day.
It's pretty expensive to build that, though, right?
I agree, and that's why those customers have been utilities primarily. We did one 6 megawatt portfolio, 500 kilowatt systems with another utility in Ontario because of that guarantee. Usually utilities are not limited by such simple things as money. So they don't really have so much concern about what they're spending up front. So utilities typically are very fond of Fronius inverters. We've worked with NMAX, we've worked with Toronto Hydro, we've worked with ATCO, Peterborough Utilities, a number of utilities across Nova Scotia Power, a number of utilities across the country for various reasons on various projects. And generally speaking, they're all very happy with their hefty investment. Anything else?
Awesome.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.